Good evening from the United Kingdom. Sorry for the less than attractive backdrop, as it is almost 9 o'clock at night here in the UK. So I'm moving forward with my presentation on my research paper. My research topic that I chose was the Big Five personality traits, or the 5 form factor model. I took the approach from reading our text that the Big Five was something important, especially as it came to corporate identity and corporate community and building organizations, and how leaders use the Big Five to help guide and mentor employees. However, as I continued to read and continued to look at the issue of the Big Five, I noticed that there was never any information on how the Big Five personality traits were dealt with in leadership positions. It was always directed towards how leaders could use the Big Five to help advance or grow employees into positions of leadership, and how the Big Five affect what positions they fit into an organization. And as important as that is, I found it interesting that there was less information about how managers use the Big Five personality traits for themselves, for how they handled their personality traits within the organization. Looking at it, you have the Big Five personality traits. You have agreeableness, you have conscientiousness, you have neuroticism, you have extroversion, and you have openness. Now, all the literature, I broke it down into, I looked at literature for each five of the personality groups. Agreeableness had positive. Agreeableness, the personality trait tends to be someone who pushes back less, just wants to go along and make sure everybody's happy and make sure that everything in their environment is copacetic, and that life is moving from one stage to the next smoothly. Now, that is a positive, but it can also be a negative, because you don't always necessarily want somebody who's just always going along to get along. So agreeableness was a positive, but yet there was some negative aspects to it. You had conscientiousness, which was a positive, because obviously you want employees and people working in an organization who have the concerns of everyone around them in their interest, and in an honest interest, not just a superficial manner, but in a way that they can actually care for those around them, because the organization and the work environment seems to work better that way. Moving on from conscientiousness, you had neuroticism, which was a negative through and through. Neuroticism had next to no positive attributes to it whatsoever. And then you have extroversion, which had a very high level positivity, but yet it still had a certain level of negative to it, because of the potential for an extrovert to slip into a neurotic personality trait. And then finally, you had openness. Openness was a highly desirable trait, because it allowed people with openness tend to be willing to experiment with new ideas, be willing to accept change better, and be willing to work outside of their comfort zone. So openness was a very high positive. The other aspect that was interesting was that it was discovered that personality traits aren't stagnant across the board. Just because you might measure high in agreeableness one day, a few years down the road, it could be completely different. What they did discover, though, is that openness tended to reduce over time, because as people remained in one organization, they started to fear and protect their position, and they started to close their mind to new ideas and the concept of change. So openness actually started to reduce, especially amongst managers who would stay in positions longer than a few years. So the personality traits continue to change, they fluctuate. You might be agreeable one day, and I pray that you never become a neurotic, because that would just be horrible. So those were the five traits, and those were the ones that I focused on. What I discovered, though, was that there was no real information on how those personality traits affected management and affected people who created the organization. A lot of the corporate identity and the corporate community was focused on how employees' personality traits affected it. However, I was hoping that I could find more research that showed how creators of organizations, how their personality traits bled through their organizations and how their management adopted their personality traits over time. An interesting aspect to the personality traits, and this is looking at it from a biblical perspective, is how Christ used personality traits to build his management, if you will. And I don't use the 12 disciples as management. I don't say that they're management, but if you look at it, all the disciples across the board displayed some level of the big five personality traits, even neuroticism. Judas Iscariot, if you look historically, he was a thief. He was in charge of the purse that Christ carried, that they had for their money, and he was known to steal from that purse. He would take money and he would go spend it on things that they didn't need and things that he wanted because he thought he had all the control. So much so that he bled the bank dry, if you will, and then betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. So even Christ viewed all the personality traits when building his disciples. You can look at every single one of the disciples and you can see a level of agreeableness. You can see a level of openness. You can see a level of extroversion. Extroversion, just look at Peter. Peter, the rock who I will build my church on. The rock was basically a synonym for Peter being a stubborn person. Jesus knew that he was stubborn, but he was an extrovert. He was the first one, to draw the sword when Judas showed up to betray him and cut the ear off of the centurion. So Jesus knew that these personality traits were vital and that you could use them to help build your management and build your management team and build those around you. So that's kind of the biblical perspective that I'm approaching the big five personality traits with. I hope it makes sense. I hope that you guys get something out of this research paper topic. And if you want to read it, hit me an email and I'll send it to you and I'll be more than happy to share it. Had a great time in this class. Look forward to learning with you guys more in the future. Have a great night. Bye.